How's it going, guys? Shape here, and welcome to the channel. This video is going to go over how to choose and stay on top of your markets. A really big mistake a lot of new gold makers make is that they will pick one gold farm that has the most gold per hour you can make and just do that farm over and over again. Unless the farm you are doing is selling at an insanely high rate, then you're going to eventually hit the diminishing return and not sell your items in a timely manner and most likely end up tanking the market. It is never good to flood the market with a ton of the same material and expect them to all to sell. For instance, if you go and farm up 10,000 volatile fires and put those all in the auction house at the same time, you are setting yourself up for a letdown. Sure, a few of those volatiles might sell, but unless you are severely undercutting the other postings, you'll end up sitting on a lot of those for a while. You have to know how those volatile fires are going to sell on your server before putting all those hours into the farm. I know that on average 500 or so volatile fires sell per day on my server, and they have a sales rate of 0.37. Now a new gold maker might look at that and see the sales rate of 0.37 and be like, that is a really good one to focus on, and just flood the market with that. This would be a mistake because they forgot our data said that only 500 were sold daily. Let's go back to the 10,000 volatiles fire example. If you were to put all those on the auction house, then the most you would expect to sell on average, and if you sold all of yours in a day, would be about 500. There's no reason to flood the auction house with the other 9,500. Instead, limit how many you post per day, let those sell, and then post from your stockpile. There is no reason to go out and farm even more volatile fires until you are getting close to selling all of the 10,000 you had in supply. You should instead go use your time for another farm to diversify your market so you can be in control of multiple. The next question a lot of new gold makers will ask is how to choose a market to be in. Well, that's a great question. As I said earlier, you don't want to go all in on just one farm. You instead want to diversify your farms. First, you're going to want to choose what type of farms you enjoy doing. I wouldn't try and get into multiple markets until you have built a foundation in one. That will require a lot of effort and expertise to be able to pull that off, and if you're just starting out and trying to find a market, then that will just overcomplicate things. Let's choose to stick with two different farms I have discussed in the past and go over how I'm staying on top of those markets and why I chose them. The Primals and Volatile farms are some I have talked about frequently, so let's go behind the scenes and look into those markets. Why did I even choose these markets to begin with? This is where the research begins. I always recommend checking the Undermine journal for pricing and trend breakdowns. This is probably my number one source of information when it comes to choosing new farms to get into. I also tend to make Google Sheets to more easily keep up with the farms I am doing, but you can use this with in-game add-ons such as TSM, Worth It, or some others, but what can I say, I'm old school. I noticed that both of these farms had good sales rate, good gold per hour, and a good amount of daily items sold over the course of multiple months. That is important because to become a true player in the market, you will want a farm that isn't just a fad but is more consistent, because in the end it will be better for the long-term play. The way I found these farms was by looking up some of the higher selling transmog items and mounts in the game and seeing what materials were used in crafting those. To take it a step further, you can look at which crafted items are selling at a higher sales rate and target those materials, because the faster those are selling, the more materials they will need to craft. Most players will just buy the items instead of go and farm them, because in the end it is more profitable for them to not waste the time farming. The Primals have been on my gold farming list for years now. They are used in mostly transmog pieces and tend to have a decent sales rate. With that being said, they are still tied to transmog items and will have a lower sales rate than most other items. Knowing the sales rate is important because now I know I'm not going to need as many on the auction house at any given time. There are 7 different Primal materials that we can choose from to do. As we see, Primal Fire is the highest selling Primal on my server, and it averages around 518 gold per. This doesn't mean only dump a ton of the Primal Fires onto the auction house. We still need to look at the individual sales rate and how many that are sold on a daily basis to really understand the market. The sales rate is 0.26, and there are on average 26 sold each day on my server. With this information, we can now devise a plan on how we are going to post our Primal Fires. This is where your stock of the item is going to come into play. To get the most profit in the end, you are going to want to make sure you always have the items you're selling up on the auction house. Think of this similar to a grocery store where you always want to have the stock of your items, because if you don't have milk per se, then someone is going to come in looking to buy milk and they're going to go elsewhere to get that milk and possibly pay even more. This is where your competitors come into play, because they have that item up for sale in the auction house and were there when someone was trying to buy it. This also requires you to stay on top of your postings, so keep that in mind and make sure you don't have an auction expire and not have the items on the auction house. Right now I have a stock of 104 Primal Fires. This means I should be good for a few days if all of my items actually sell each and every day. Once my items do sell, I can put up more for my stockpile and stay in control of the market. Now you're gonna run into some players trying to undercut you every now and then, and I wouldn't really worry about them. They aren't gonna be as consistent as you are in the long term, so you will come out on top. Since we have a pretty good amount of stock of the Primal Fires, let's look at some other primals we may need to go farm some more of. Based off of our chart, we see that we only have 23 Primal Waters and none of the Primal Earths, Shadows, or Lives. An important thing here is to look at the gold per hour and average price of the items that are sold. The reason we don't have any stock of the Earth, Shadow, or Life is because it really isn't worth our time to be in that market. It is, however, good to keep an eye on this in case it changes, but for now we have plenty of others to focus on that are even higher gold per hour. Let's go back to the Primal Water. With only 23 in stock and an average of 16 sold per day, that means we are almost out of material. Since we already have enough of the other primals we care about, then we should invest some time into farming more of the Primal Waters to ensure we don't miss out on those sales. Since we have a pretty good understanding of that market, let's switch our focus onto another farm we mentioned earlier. For the Volatile farm, we can see that we have a higher gold per hour, sales rate, and average daily sold. If we were to have to pick one of the markets to focus on instead of the other, then we would choose this market because of those reasons. Now this isn't to say that you have to abandon the Primal market, it just means at the end of the day that this is a more important market in terms of gold making to stay on top of. The Volatiles are mainly tied to the Vial of the Sands mount. As you can see, I have a huge stockpile of these materials for that reason. The Vial of the Sands mount tends to have a higher sales rate towards the end of the expansion and the beginning of the next. This is because players start to come back and may not have flying yet in the most recent expansion, and to do stuff with friends, they will just have a 2-seater mount to carry them around. The Vial of the Sands mount is probably the easiest and cheapest 2-seater mount to obtain. I am stockpiling the materials for the mount because I believe they're going to go up in price once Shadowlands releases. Even with that said, I currently only have a little over 2 days worth of stock because the average daily sold is really high for these materials. That is still important to note, even though I don't plan on selling them right now. I can still control the market even though I am stockpiling the materials. Since we know the average prices of these materials over an extended period of time, we can use that data to make sure the prices stay that way. If any of the prices go under a certain price, we can choose to buy out the market and reset it. This is a riskier way to control the market, but if you have the capital and the data to back up your decision, then you can make some profit out of it in the end by just flipping the item. Let's say one day the price of the Volatile Fires drops to 20 gold per. We know over the course of the last few months the average has been around 25 gold. We can choose to buy out all of the Volatiles under 25 gold amount and either repost them or just keep them in our stockpile for later. That all depends on if you want to invest and double down on what you think is going to happen to the price in the future. For the Volatiles, it is pretty safe to do this because we already know towards the end of an expansion and the beginning of a new expansion, these materials will go up in value. Another good way to stay on top of the prices for your materials in-game is to make sure you have some groups set up in TSM, or just simply add them to your favorites list on the WoW UI if you don't use TSM. TSM will allow you to make a group called Primals or Volatiles, and you can include all the materials in those different buckets. This will allow you to just run a quick scan when you log on to see if any of the materials have changed, and make sure you always have your items in stock or have the ability to flip them if they're underpriced. Either way, if you're trying to control a market by making sure you always have your items on the auction house, or you're just trying to make sure the materials stay at a certain price, it isn't going to be possible if you don't know your market and have the data to back that up. Well, there you have it, guys. That is how I choose and stay on top of my markets. I hope you guys enjoyed, and don't forget to subscribe and drop a like if you enjoyed the video to show some love for the channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.